What it do, everybody? Welcome to the Fantasy Flex podcast. I am your host, Chris Raybon, and this is our wide receiver stock watch episode for 2023, where we break down all the wide receiver ADPs, guys we're high on, guys we're low on. And here to help me do it, one of my fellow top rankers in the game, Sean Kerner. Sean, what's going on?
What's up? I just snapped a 15 bet winning streak yesterday.
Woo!
So I had a good week, WNBA, NBA, baseball, love it. So recovering from that, but hoping to start a new one. How are you doing?
I'm pretty good. I'm gearing up for the finals. I mean, what a
Yeah.
wild, what a wild ride was
Oh,
that Eastern Conference Finals. But finally we got a matchup, and
sidebar here. You think Nuggets crush them,
yeah,
or you think it's close?
I,
Yeah.
I don't
Okay.
think I don't think they crush him. I do think that I think that he get a couple in Miami at least because Denver has not
Yeah.
been nearly as good on the road, but yeah, it's kind of tough with just that series going seven. I think and then the first two games being in
Yeah.
Denver.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's gonna
For
be tough.
sure.
But yeah, let's jump into these wide receivers because we got a lot to talk about here, and I want to start with guys that we think are undervalued according to early ADP. So why don't you start us off?
Yeah. So I'm going with Michael Gallup, who, as of now, is going like right around wide receiver 71,
Mm-hmm.
which is just way too low. He had a disappointing 2022 season last year. A lot of that had to do just with the fact that he tore his ACL towards the end of 2021. So he was never quite 100% last season. And while the Cowboys, they brought in Brandon Cooks, who could make Gallup more of a wide receiver three instead of a wide receiver two in the offense, they did lose Dalton Schultz. And I don't think they really did a good job trying to replace those targets. So Gallup should be the number three target at worst in this offense, and he's an injury away of being a top two target. So I just think Gallup's typically pretty cheap going into the season, but right now wide receiver 71 is ridiculous. So I just love taking a flyer on him in this range.
Yeah, I totally agree. He's one of the guys I had written down as well because I think, coming off the ACL injury last year, and it seemed like he was rushed back a little bit.
Yeah,
You expect him to be more recovered a year down the line. Brandon Cook's also a little bit older, so it's no given he just steps into that, exact same Amari Cooper role, I guess you would call it, from a
mm-hmm.
couple years ago. So yeah, Gallup is a guy who I had my eye on as well. I think he'll, anytime you can take a receiver that's had a track record of production, still young, and in an offense that should be pretty strong. I think you're winning there. So yeah, wide receiver, what is it, 70? Way too low.
71.
Ooh,
Get
yeah.
that extra slot in there.
uh, I'll go with. I'll start off with Keenan Allen. Always one of my favorite guys on this podcast. I think everybody knows, but whatever demise seems to be baked into his ADP here at wide receiver 22. I think that's premature because yes, guys are going to miss games from time to time, and he had a pretty bad season with that last year. But in the 10 games that Keenan Allen played, he was the wide receiver 12 in half PPR
Mm-hmm.
points per game. So the on-field production, even with him being hindered in some of those games, the on-field production was still there. He's one of the best route runners in the league. And, I think ultimately them drafting a guy like Quentin Johnston is only going to help, kind of keep the defense honest because Allen's not going down the field as much as maybe he would have in his first couple of years, but he's going to win everything intermediate underneath. You got Mike Williams, you got Johnston, guys that can, do things at different parts of the field. The tight end situation is still meh. Like it's not really going to take a ton of targets away from Allen. And he's always competed with Austin Eckler and still managed to be one of the most productive fantasy receivers in the game. I think this Charger offense, still going to continue to throw at a high rate. That seems to be what they believe in. So, yeah, I think Keenan Allen, if he gets hurt, people are going to be like, oh, yeah,
Yeah.
that ADP made sense, but you're not really banking on a wide receiver to get hurt. If it was a running back,
Mm-hmm.
with somewhat of an injury history, I think you'd look at it a little differently. But this was just we've seen this before from him where he's had like a really bad season. He barely plays any games, and he comes back in the next 4 or 5 years. He just goes right back to doing what he does. So I still think he's got a few years left in him. Didn't see any drop off again on the field. So I think wide receiver 22 is too low.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you nailed it where, he did miss 6 or 7 games, but when he was healthy, he was still elite. I think I'd be concerned if his production dropped off, but he's still elite. And he was labeled as like an injury risk after his first 3 or 4 seasons, and then he missed what 2 total games over the next 5 seasons.
Yeah.
So he's proven to be durable. He's always super consistent. So, and Justin Herbert had a bad for him. He had a bad season, probably due to Keenan Allen missing so much time. So I think Herbert will bounce back, and you can invest in that through Keenan Allen.
Absolutely. Who you got next?
I got Alan Lazard, baby, at wide receiver 56. Yes, he is my boy. And, he was one of my favorite sleepers last year. He didn't pan out quite the way I thought he would. Christian Watson, took me for a surprise a bit, but he still ended up as the wide receiver 30 last season. He obviously he isn't an elite talent. And obviously Garrett Wilson is the better talent and will be Aaron Rodgers' #1 target this season. But Lazard already has the most chemistry with Rodgers, and he's probably more equipped to really be the wide receiver 2 in an offense anyway. So, if this Jets offense hits, Lazard's going to be steal at wide receiver 56. So I just think he makes a ton of sense. Aaron Rodgers brought him over for a reason. So I think he's going to target him enough, especially in the red zone, to hit at this price.
Yeah, like Alan Lazard was one of the guys, maybe even the wide receiver I was most wrong about last year. I just did not believe in him as a #1 kind of guy. Always, didn't believe that he could get open enough to warrant that kind of workload and also hold the position for the whole year. But he was playing pretty much every snap, and he was pretty productive most of the year. I know Watson did kind of take some of his thunder near the end, but he's a guy that I think last year, I think he was still kind of getting better, which I think is a positive for him going forward, because that's one of the reasons I was down on him. I'm like, all right, this guy is what was he, 20? What is he, 28 now? I think it's going to be his 28, age 28 season. Yeah. So, usually those are guys.
Prime.
Right. So usually those are guys I stay away from, but he proved me wrong. And the fact that the Jets went out and gave him such a lucrative contract, and he's going to a quarterback that he's already familiar with, I think he should be a pretty solid play. I mean, it's getting pretty crowded in that Jet receiver room. I'm interested to see because they still got Davis there, right?
Yeah, and Mecole Hardman. I still love Denzel Mims. I keep hoping he gets traded.
Yeah.
They could trade away at Corey Davis. I would not be shocked.
Yeah, I would think
so. I think this receiving room will be a little bit thinner come week 1. But if
he makes the team.
Exactly.
But yeah, no, the money talks with Lazard. The money talks.
Yeah.
For me, my next one is Treylon Burks, wide receiver 43 or in the mid 40s. I really like investing in year 2 breakout candidates for wide receivers, and Burks has kind of everything that I look for in a guy that could beat his ADP by a good 20 or so slots. #1, he's kind of locked in as that primary only target that could potentially really be a target hog in Tennessee. Obviously, you got the tight end Okonkwo, who I love as well. But this team really is in dire need of a wide receiver to just get targets. And down the stretch, Burks started coming on. He had a bunch of games, over 50 yards, and really started to put it together. And if you kind of extrapolated what he was doing down the stretch at the end of last year, his numbers wouldn't look that different from a guy like AJ Brown's, except for the touchdowns, and maybe those will come in due time. But I just think that this guy Burks, he did enough last year down the stretch for me to look and say, okay, with a lot of targets and no real competition in that wide receiver room, that he could have a second year leap, because you always like guys to finish strong, because some guys hit a rookie wall in their first years. But Burks had in his last 6 games, he had a 7 for 111, a 4 for 70, a 4 for 66, another 4-catch game where he didn't really get much yardage wise. But I did like what I saw down the stretch from him. And I think wide receiver 43, these are the guys. We see this every year. These year 2 guys, they just kind of come out of nowhere, and it's like, oh wow, like if only I had just they don't look that great. Like on paper, they're just like, oh, whatever, it looks like the right spot. But I think these are the guys that tend to go up in value. We've seen this repeatedly. And so Burks is a guy I'll be investing in as a potential AJ Brown, like even target hog in that Titans offense.
Yeah, you keep banging the table for Burks. I love it. He's still too cheap. And this is the range we're really trying to take flyers on guys with the high ceiling, which he obviously does, but he probably has the higher floor out of all these wide receivers, because he's the undisputed number one target in this offense, right, heading into the season. So I think he has a really high floor too. So whether you target running backs, tight ends early, and he's your wide receiver 3, or he's your first wide receiver on the bench, or you're playing best ball, he's a no brainer in this range.
Yeah, and couldn't have had a worse offseason last year.
Yeah.
And this year it's been a lot better. Obviously it's puff piece season, but
Right.
no issues thus far with anything physical or otherwise. So that's always good to hear. Who else you got?
I'm going with Jordan Addison at wide receiver 42 range is where he's being drafted. And this, I always have to promote the rookie wide receiver coming out of VOC, but for a good reason. I mean, they just keep generating elite wide receivers, and he's the next one. And I love the landing spot in Minnesota. Obviously he's going to be the number 3 target behind Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson. But he's like an Emmanuel Sanders type of receiver. I think he's going to thrive as a wide receiver too. Should take up most of the targets left behind by Adam Thielen, eat into KJ Osborne's target share as well. He can line up inside, outside. He's a smaller receiver, but he could do it all. So I just think in this range for a rookie, he has a great floor ceiling combo. So this is the range I think you should be taking, a rookie with upside like Addison does.
Yeah, he's and what is the only knock on him is his size, really, right? Like that's the only.
Yeah, you could fix that though. Just
just get in the gym,
bulk up a bit. Yeah, that's pretty easy to fix. So I think he will have to put on some pounds. I think the last I checked, he was like 175. But if he just gets up to 180, he should be fine. He can play outside, but if he has to line up inside, so be it. He could do it all.
All right. Next for me is Romeo Doubs. He's going wide receiver 58, and this is just another example of guys that I like to take in year 2. And the reason for Doubs, at first, when I saw the Packers draft, I was like, all right, they drafted what, like 2-3 receivers, they drafted a couple of tight ends, and I was like, this is probably not great news for Doubs. But the more I kind of dig into it in the offseason, there's like a clear separation between Watson and Doubs, and then everyone else. Like everyone else is like a rookie, a guy that they're kind of developing long term. And Doubs is the guy that he's working out with Jordan Love all off season. And LaFleur is saying they're going to rely on Watson and Doubs in this offense. And I think obviously Aaron Jones will probably get more targets than your average running back and continue to be a factor. But Doubs is a guy I think a lot of us liked last year. We still like the talent. And, even though it looked like last year, it looked like he probably was going to potentially have a bigger role. This year, I think his role is more locked in. I think he's another guy that's showing he can be on the field for every snap outside. So, I do think Watson will be the top receiver there. Wide receiver 58, I think you're getting kind of some free upside here because we just really don't know much about Jordan Love. But you're essentially getting him at like the bottom barrel price for like a wide receiver 2. At wide receiver 58, if you say there's like 64, top 2 wide receivers, there's a couple of number 3s in there, but the point is, this guy, he had a target share of about 20.5% per route run. So anytime you're getting above 20, that kind of says you can be, more than just your kind of, default target. Like you can be commanding, targets in that, top 1, top 2 range. On your team. So I think Doubs has a sneaky bet to kind of break out a little more this season. So like taking that shot at Doubs at wide receiver 58. And this also could be a maybe the shakiest Packer team we've seen in a while, which only would help them, throwing the ball. Because last year, even though they went 8-9, it wasn't like they had an amazing year throwing the ball volume wise or otherwise. So even some added volume because the team is not as good could potentially help him. But anyway, I think he takes a step forward. Still like the talent.
Yeah, I mean, remember after like week 5 or 6, you, everybody thought Doubs was the next like Devontae Adams replacement. We kind of forgot about Christian Watson. So he's there. I think he's going to be a top 2 target. I think Jaden Reed, it was a good landing spot for him, but I think he's more of a returner. He's not that polished yet as a receiver. So I think Doubs can hold him off and either way be a top 2 target. So yeah, I love getting him in that range as well.
All right, who else you got?
Going with another rookie in this range, the wide receiver 45 range. This is where I love to take rookies, and it's Quentin Johnson. I love the landing spot on the Chargers. Obviously, I think he also has the highest upside of all rookie wide receivers. But despite being 6'4", he's surprisingly not great at contested catches.
Yeah.
But he's really good at generating yak. So he has all those skills that are unteachable. So, if he were to fix, his handwork, be better at contested catches, he's going to be a home run in the draft. And I think, the reason I like him is he'll probably take over the Josh Palmer role as wide receiver 3. And, I've been high on Palmer the past couple seasons.
Oh, yeah.
Not necessarily due to his skills. It's really just due to the situation. Because if Keenan Allen or Mike Williams miss time, Johnson could provide wide receiver 3 or better value. And just given the past few seasons, seems more likely than not he's going to have a few games where you can bank on him in your lineup or in best ball. And I think having a new offensive coordinator there like Kellen Moore could help unleash Justin Herbert's upside. So I just love him being attached to Herbert in his rookie season. And even though he's not a perfect prospect, he has the highest ceiling. So that's why I like taking him in this range.
Yeah, where's he going now? He's like in the
wide
40s?
Receiver 45. Yeah.
Yeah, like that's pretty high. Honestly, for me, like I think that's like kind of at the ceiling that I take him.
47.
Yeah,
whatever.
like I mean, what's your ceiling for? Like, what's your ceiling that you would take him?
Probably like if he's still there, it depends who else is available. Always, but I would say wide receiver 39 or 40.
Okay.
But he does fall. There's a lot of guys in this range that I'm avoiding and taking, so it's kind of a mixed bag.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. But I just think that remember ranking Josh Palmer last year whenever Keenan Allen or Mike Williams were out, he was like a wide receiver 2.
Yeah.
So and Johnson's good enough where he doesn't need either one of those receivers to miss time to really establish himself as a wide receiver 3. This is partly just investing on Herbert having a really good season. So he just has a lot of things going in his favor. And like I said, he just has the highest upside of all of this class. And this is the range where he's going to be your wide receiver 4 or wide receiver 5. You might as well just take a shot like that.
Yeah, different type of receiver, but I think the hope is that it kind of gets into like a Tyler Boyd type of situation where he's on the field every snap. Yeah. And, if any one of them, the top 2 gets hurt, he'll have a good game. And sometimes he'll just have a good game because of the matchup. And Everett and that whole tight end room, they didn't really get a chance to improve it in any way. So the tight ends, you can kind of look at them like, okay, those are the bottom. That's the bottom of the target totem pole. And that number 3 wide receiver could beat them out for targets this year because they didn't really do anything. They're going to go back with Everett, McKitty, Parham.
Oh God,
they like McKitty. I every time like they're talking. I hear the GM talking about like we didn't add anything in the tight end room, but we got McKitty.
Yeah, no, they love McKitty.
Yes, okay, cool name, but so another guy I like to beat his ADP is Alec Pierce at wide receiver 72. And this is another guy initially when the draft happens, I was like, I don't know. They drafted Josh Downs, but Josh Downs, obviously a Paris Campbell replacement in the slot, but this is going to be a whole new offense now with Steichen and Anthony Richardson here. And I think Pierce can really flourish in this type of offense. It's going to be a lot more of a vertical type of offense. And I just don't think Matt Ryan could really do that. Obviously he was on his last legs last year, but you look at Pierce's numbers with Ryan, 48% catch rate, 7.3 yards per target. That was worse than with just all the other quarterbacks that Indianapolis trotted out there. He had a 65% catch rate and 8.6 yards per target. Now, the sample's obviously smaller, just 20 targets, but it just kind of shows that a lot of the time it was, Pierce just running wind sprints in routes in places that Ryan wasn't really, and that offense in general just wasn't going, which was down the field. So I think, Richardson especially adds a whole new element. It's not like Pierce, you're betting on a ton of volume here, but you're betting on some big plays. And I do think he's a guy that, has shown he could be on the field every snap. He's a bigger body, so he'll give you enough in blocking to kind of leave out there. So I think he's another kind of sneaky year 2 breakout where, I'm sure people look at Pittman and I'm sure, Downs being the shiny new toy, he'll get some love. But I think Pierce, when you look at all of their ADPs, I think Pierce actually has the best bet at not only beating his ADP, but getting into that, flex-ish range where you can actually use him from week to week and know you have a chance for a big play or a touchdown or 80 yards and a touchdown, something like that. So I like Alec Pierce to beat his wide receiver 72 ADP.
Yeah, and I think he's going to offer the most value early in the season. I think Gardner Minshew is going to start, I don't know, the first few games. They play the Texans, the Rams. The Rams defense, you mentioned it, could be a disaster this year. So I think he might be a good sell high candidate when that happens, because when Anthony Richardson takes over, they might not throw as much. And
I don't mind that though. I don't mind Richards because I want Richardson's arm. That's the thing. Like I want Richardson's arm. Yeah. Like
exactly.
I'm not saying like I don't think Pierce he's not gonna be like a 6 for 106 guy. But I'm saying I think he can be like a 3 or 4 for like 80 guy, a little more than his ADP suggests.
Definitely, just based on the talent alone, he should not be drafted in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree with that 100%. But I think he could start off pretty hot.
All right. Anybody else for you?
That's it for me. You got one more, right?
I got a couple. I'll just run them by you because I'm not as. So the first guy, and I don't know what to do with this guy, DJ Chark. I think is really interesting because he's at wide receiver 51. Adam Thielen, pretty much everything suggested like that he's declining. I kind of looked into it a little more, watched him. He looks like he's going downhill. Mingo's a second round pick. So it could take a little bit of time. You also got Terrace Marshall there, who seems like he might even get a chance to start, but like that's Terrace Marshall. But like Chark is entering his this what is it? 20? Let me see. Let me make sure.
Yeah, he's still young. Yeah,
he's entering his prime. Let's see. This will be his age 27 season. Yeah. And we've seen him put up, kind of like a team leading, in 70 catch 1,000-yard season before. He's been kind of hurt, so I think that does hurt him. But I'm just curious as to what you thought, because like I think we're kind of underestimating Chark leading, like being the number one in Carolina. So I'm just curious as what you think of him in general, because I'm not like completely sold on him yet either. Right. But I'm just kind of wanting to run it by you.
I think he's best ball only. Like he's perfect for best ball, but. I mean, I'm not completely writing off Adam Thielen. Okay. Like I said, he's not going to be anywhere close to his prime. But I think to start with a rookie, he could be a reliable target still. Plus, he was lined up against, across from the greatest wide receiver in the game right now last year. So that's kind of why he wasn't seeing as many targets. But I love Jonathan Mingo as a prospect. I think he could surprise as a rookie. I can't write off Terrace Marshall quite yet. I just can't. And Laviska Shenault's still there. I love Hayden Hurst. So there's just a lot of weapons there. I don't really know how it's going to, sort out. But Chark has his role in this offense. I think, like you mentioned, I think he's going to play a key role. But it'll be more the deep threat. Who knows how Bryce Young will look in year one. So I think Chark will have a few big games. Good luck trying to figure out which ones they are. So I'm just saying he's a best ball only bet for me.
No, that makes sense. And I think his ADP actually will drop, because I don't think there are a lot of people going to be too excited. But he just kind of, as I was digging into the Panthers, he was just the guy that kind of stuck out as like, okay, I'm sure there's people that are going to think Thielen because of the history. There's people going to think Mingo because of the new toy, Marshall because of the last 4 or 5 games that he ended the year. But and then Hurst because another guy, new toy. But yeah, I don't know. Chark just stuck out entering his prime. And then the other one, and I actually do like this guy. I do think he beats his ADP, but still curious to see your thoughts on him. I know you did a lot of work on the draft and kind of mocking these up. Marvin Mims Jr. Is going wide receiver 89. And I from everything we're hearing out of camp, new regime, Sean Payton, they draft a wide receiver on day 2, even though they have a pretty good, I mean, you would think, depth chart of wide receivers. It just doesn't seem like they're sold on Judy or Sutton. We're hearing them both have been available in trade rumors. Tim Patrick is kind of like, he was kind of hanging on and outplaying those guys, but now coming off a major injury and new regime, I don't know if I don't think he's going to be looked at in the same light. Hamler can't stay healthy. Right. So I think this Marvin Mims guy could actually make an impact as a rookie. And even Dulcich, we kind of talked about how we don't know where he stands because they brought in Troutman. So I'm just curious as to your thoughts on Mims, because he's another guy kind of stuck out. Wide receiver 89. I think he beats that ADP at a minimum, but I think he may be a lot more involved in this Denver passing attack from day one than is thought at the moment.
Yeah, for sure. I think the plan with Mims is to be sort of the KJ Hamler replacement kind of reminds me of him. So, like you mentioned, Hamler just can't stay healthy. You have a new coaching regime. I think Mims would fit that mold. Plus, I don't know if they're going to enter the season with Judy, Sutton, and Patrick, right? Aren't they?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think if right now invest in him, because if that happens, yes, he will smash his ADP right now. So I would say that's the angle. I still think my favorite investment in this offense is still Greg Dulcich, but where you can get Mims right now, considering one of those top 3 receivers might be gone, I think you should do it. Yeah, so I like Mims as a prospect. It's a good landing spot for him because this wide receiver tree depth chart could shake up before week 1. So I like that call.
Yeah, maybe he'll be like this year's Rashid Shaheed or something. He is a 4.3840 or something like that. So
Oh yeah,
he might be able to do a lot with a little, but yeah,
yeah,
I mean, Sean Payton's kind of telegraphing the guys that he
yeah.
wants and the guys that he doesn't. So that, using what was it, the 230, the last pick of the second round, on a wide receiver kind of stuck out with all the pass catching talent they have. So yeah, I would say at the bare minimum, if you're not in a position to like invest in him because you don't play a lot of bus ball, like if you just a redraft player or whatever, like keep tabs on this guy.
Yeah, keep tabs.
Set up a Google alert or something because I think he could blow up. All right. Let's go to my favorite guys who are overvalued. Too many puff pieces this time of year.
Yeah.
Start us off.
So for my first overvalued guy, I got to go with Elijah Moore, who's wide receiver 49. And last year I still like Elijah Moore as a talent. He had an impressive rookie season. He was the wide receiver 2 overall during a 6 to 7 week stretch. And then last year he had a sophomore slump, fell out of favor with the Jets. So I think he should benefit from, fresh scenery, ending up in a different scheme. But wide receiver 49 is just way too high because while Moore should get the first crack at the Browns slot receiver role, they still have Amari Cooper, Donovan Peoples-Jones, David Njoku. They drafted Cedric Tillman. So there's a lot of potential weapons there. So Moore will be the number 3 target in a fairly run-heavy offense still. And Deshaun Watson, it goes without saying, he struggled last season, especially on underneath throws. He had an 81% catch ball rate to slot receivers, which is 31st out of 41 QBs. So Deshaun Watson and Elijah Moore are 2 very talented players coming off bad years. I think both of them really have to bounce back with good season for Moore to hit at this price. So in the wide receiver 49 range, I just rather take flyers on, rookies like Jordan Addison, Quentin Johnson. I don't know, maybe hoping Michael Thomas can stay healthy for once. I just see more paths to upside and higher floors with guys in this range than Elijah Moore.
Yeah, it's usually like, I think it's the rookies and it's those year 2 guys. And then when you look at a guy like Moore, who's he's still young, but going to a new team, that doesn't always, it's not always a seamless transition, especially when there's a lot of question marks about Watson. So I think if he dropped a little bit, it would make more sense because he does have a chance to get, I think to be a more of a target hog than a guy like DPJ, who's more of a downfield guy. But that's not even a guarantee as of now. So it's going to be tough.
And there's already puff pieces on him, being Deshaun Watson's favorite target OTAs, but they're just running around in shorts with no one covering him, right? So
I mean, and I saw a bunch of
and Cooper's hurt. So
I saw some pieces that were saying Watson was actually not throwing the ball that well, and
oh no, really?
Anyway, so that's also.
And I feel like every year we have like 3 or 4 games in Cleveland where there's like 30+ amount of wins or some bomb cyclone.
Oh yeah. They'll beat the Ravens like 10-6 or something.
Yeah, exactly. So you got to factor that in by now, right? For Browns players. So yeah.
I'll start off with the first overvalued guy I see on the ADP list is our boy Deebo Samuel. He's wide receiver 15, and I think that's too high just given what kind of this offense is now with Christian McCaffrey there.
Yep.
They just have so many weapons, and we kind of saw that even last year where Samuel, and obviously he was a little bit banged up at various points, but 8 targets per game without McCaffrey in the lineup, and that dropped to 6.7 per game with McCaffrey in the lineup, and his receiving yardage dropped from 58 per game to 41 per game. And also you also have less of a need to give him a ton of rushing attempts with CMC and Elijah Mitchell in there. There were times when Debo was getting 8-10 rushing attempts. Now I think it's usually going to be in that 4 to 6 range at tops. So I think you lose some of the ceiling and you lose some of the floor with Debo in this McCaffrey offense. So still obviously a offensive weapon and a guy who could put up a massive week at any point. But I think he's a little bit closer to Brandon Ayuk in terms of value now, just because his usage isn't so as unique as it was before McCaffrey got there. So without McCaffrey, elite wide receiver one, sure, but he's still being drafted as a borderline wide receiver one. And it's now, and we also don't have Jimmy Garoppolo. There's question marks about when Purdy will be ready. We don't know exactly how it'll look with Lance. If he's still there or Darnold. So yeah, there's just a lot of question marks. I think wide receiver 15 is a little too rich for Debo. And I believe you were even down on Debo last year, kind of saying he probably couldn't repeat.
Touchdown.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so so I think there's still that kind of residual effect of what he did a couple of years ago baked into this ADP in terms of upside, but I don't really see that upside there with McCaffrey. I obviously a better best ball pick than probably a redraft, but still wide receiver 15 is a little too rich.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's just when you're projecting the Niners, it's just impossible because we don't know who's going to be the quarterback. And it's just a massive difference having Brock Purdy or Trey Lance back there, or, how Sam Darnold will look. So it's really tough, but I think you hit the nail on the head when it comes to Debo. Just Christian McCaffrey is kind of that role where, he's getting those direct handoffs. Obviously he's running back, but getting those catches out of the backfield. He really hasn't had to deal with that. They had JaMychal Hasty as their pass catching back before that. So that just really eats into Debo's target share and touchdown share. I mean, he only scored 5 touchdowns last year. So he should see some positive touchdown regression this year. And he's obviously an elite talent, but I think that's why he's being overdrafted. People are just overvaluing his real life value. But in fantasy, like you said, he's probably only going to get 3 to 4 direct handoffs a game at most, 4.5 catches. So he just doesn't have the same upside we saw at the end of, 2021.
And never more than 6 receiving touchdowns in a season, just 2 last year. So, if he's not getting those carries and if he's not getting them where it matters, down near the red zone, he could have another year with 4 or 5 touchdowns. All right. Who else you got?
So I'm pretty low on Rashad Bateman, just where he's being drafted at wide receiver 46. The Ravens could be more pass heavy. They will be under Todd Monken, but they just have so many quality pass catchers now. They added Odell Beckham. They drafted Zay Flowers, who I love. They even brought in Nelson Aguilar, who adds some nice depth. He could enter in the mix, even when everyone's healthy. And of course, they still have Mark Andrews. So Bateman's the kind of wide receiver that does rely on volume. I don't think he's going to score many touchdowns. So I think it's just he doesn't have the floor ceiling combo I like to have in the wide receiver 45 range. Plus, there's a slight chance they also bring in DeAndre Hopkins. I still think he goes to Buffalo, but anything can happen. So if Hopkins ends up in Baltimore, it's going to make Bateman's price even worse in this range. So he's also coming off a Lisfranc injury from last year, so he might not be 100% heading into camp. We'll see. So we'll have to monitor his health. But I don't know. At wide receiver 46, again, I just rather take flyers on rookies like Addison, Johnson, guys like that than Bateman, who, I think has a limited ceiling.
Yeah, and he's super inconsistent as it was. But I think last year you kind of looked at it and said, okay, well, he has a chance to be that number 1 receiver, where now it's kind of up in the air, not only with guys on the roster, but guys that aren't even on the roster yet that could overtake him. So yeah, it's a tough situation. And I feel the same way about Odell Beckham. He's going at wide receiver 45. He's going even higher than Bateman. And I think he's another guy that I would just exercise caution with, because you look at this Baltimore team and they, I know they got the new offensive coordinator in Monken, but still never been a super pass heavy team. And, Beckham, we've seen a major decline from age 27, which is usually like the peak of a wide receiver's career, just to age 29. He went from 4.6 catches for 65 yards at age 27 to 3.3 for 46 at age 28 to just 3.1 for 38 at age 29. Now we haven't seen him in a year. He's going to be 31, and coming off an injury, new offense, probably a lower volume offense than he's been on. I just don't see the upside here. I don't know. I don't know where his health is going to be at. I don't know if we should still expect him to stay healthy for a full year. So again, I just don't see the upside for a guy like Beckham, I think. And, even when during that Rams Super Bowl run, he was kind of living on touchdowns in a lot of those things. It wasn't like he was always putting up, 70, 80, 90 yards. So I think this could be a situation where he should help Baltimore in real life, but I don't think necessarily he's going to help fantasy teams and be consistent in any type of way on a week-to-week basis. All right, who else you got?
I'm also pretty low on. Well, let me just start by saying Jameson Williams ADP right now is wide receiver 45, and this is one of those examples. You coined it last year. Like, is the market even factoring in or aware that he's suspended the first 6 games? Because even if he wasn't suspended, I think it would make sense to draft him in this range. Last year he had a very disappointing rookie season, but we kind of knew that going in. He tore his ACL in the national championship game, which meant he wasn't going to debut until the second half of the season. But even after he debuted, he was really limited. Even when he was on the field, they didn't target him much. His only catch on the season was that 41-yard touchdown, which was just busted coverage by the Vikings. He had a nice 40-yard run on a reverse in a later game. I still think he has a ton of upside, but there's still question marks, like if it'll translate in the NFL. So just the fact that he's suspended 6 games, count me out at wide receiver 45. Again, I'd rather have potentially 17 games of Jordan Addison or Quentin Johnson than 11 at most from Jameson Williams. So I think his ADP is out of control right now.
Yeah, that doesn't make much sense because he was looking like he could potentially be a bust even if he plays, which is
is there like any kind of like optimism that he might be able to reverse this suspension or something? That's something that could make sense.
Not that I've heard. I think it was pretty cut and dry. Like, I think they got caught on team grounds.
I mean, I'm looking at best ball ADP. And again, I'm one of the people that I think sometimes you can get guys super cheap if they're expected to miss 6 games, especially if it's non-injury related, like he's going to come back and be 100%. But still, I just can't wrap my head around this. I think, in the low 60s would be a fair price, missing 6 games, but I just can't. And I love the talent, but I can't get behind wide receiver 45 right now.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of guys in this range that they're just kind of, it's early in the off season and they're just kind of there. And, we would think they would kind of switch as and kind of get into a better formation as the season grows near. But another one for me, I'm out on Adam Thielen. He's going at wide receiver 49. There's just nothing that I can point to because like he was across from Jefferson, granted, but they felt the need to like bring in a whole nother tight end to take over that number 2 role because Thielen really was not performing well in it. And if you just look at the numbers, like whether it's advanced or basic, I mean, career low 10.2 yards per catch, career low 1.1 yards per route, career low 2.3 yards after the catch, career low 21% contested catch rate, which was about 17% lower than his previous low, career low 1.4% missed tackle forced rate. His career low previously was about 3 times that. Career low in PFF grade, career low in run blocking grade. He had just less than a yard per route run in the slot, which is not good because that means he wasn't even getting open on like easy stuff. Just everywhere you look, he was trending down. And I think that's why the Vikings went out and got Hockenson. I think that's why they let him go and went and just drafted his replacement. So I don't think Thielen, is going to play well this year. And I think he's a candidate to kind of fade as the season progresses as well, because he's on the older side. We had questions about his health, a few years ago, and he kind of rebounded and he was living off touchdowns at times in this Viking offense, but this Panther offense, you just don't expect Even if Bryce Young is what we think he's going to be, you really don't expect a massive amount of touchdowns to go around in year one in this offense. So yeah, I think I'm out on Thielen in the top 50. I just think there's, like you said, there's just more upside with some of these younger guys. Where Steven, I think even if he starts the year with a couple of decent games, it's going to go downhill. So you're going to have to sell him high.
Yeah, no, and I'm much higher on Thielen than you, obviously, but I think this range, this is where you got to take guys with the high ceiling. And Thielen, I think he's a high floor guy, still do. Like he could legit be the number one target. So there would be some situations where you would take him, especially if he falls out of the top 60. Let's say you just take a bunch of high upside guys. You take a Jameson Williams, and you just need a guy to just give you some scores here and there. I think that's when Thielen makes sense. But obviously, just this range, we're trying to target guys with higher upside than Thielen.
Yeah, and similar. You got any others or?
No, that's it for me.
Yeah, I was just a couple more for me, like a similar guys. Zay Jones at wide receiver 53. With Calvin Ridley, Christian Kirk as the top two, and then Engram really emerged last year. You're looking at the number 4 target here. So I think last year was a great year to kind of that was the year you wanted to buy low on Jones. Now he's just kind of sitting here as the third target, third wide receiver, probably 4th in the target totem pole for Jacksonville. I just think there's more downside than upside, especially since Zay Jones is, he's never been elite or anything like that. And then Tim Patrick, another guy, he's going wide receiver 61. That is just way too high. Like we don't even know if he's in favor at all in this coaching staff. Like he might not even have like a starting spot, out like penciled in for him to compete for. He's coming off an injury. He was never a guy that was considered elite either. So I think, a lot of guys in this range are just being drafted here based on like some things that happened in the past. But if you're projecting forward, I think there's a lot of downside guys like Zay Jones and Tim Patrick.
Yeah, so I was gonna say Zay Jones, but he won me so much money last year I couldn't do it. But I do agree with you. He's not an elite talent, but he was a second rounder. He's talented, but I think just having Cal Ridley play on the Jaguars this year is a massive hit to his value. Plus, I mean, if you remember at the end of last season and into the playoffs, Evan Ingram just turned into a monster. Where I remember in 2021, it was James Conner, where we were like, if you watch him, it matches the numbers. He was just a beast. And if you watched Evan Ingram I know he's always had talent. He's been inconsistent, but it looked like he put it all together at the end of last season. I mean, he looked really friggin' good. So I think Evan Ingram could keep that going in the season. And that's just, Zay Jones is going to be probably the number 4 target in this offense. So that's tough. That's tough to take him in this range. Love the guy, love the player, but 53 is probably too expensive.
Yeah, DFS guy more so, I think, than I'm sure the Jaguars, because the Jaguars will probably be in some shootouts. I still don't think their defense is very good.
Yeah, he'll be 4K, stuck at 4K every week,
right,
and, touchdown upside. So
all right, that is going to do it for our 2023 wide receiver stock watch for the Fantasy Flex podcast. To recap, Sean's undervalued wide receivers: Michael Gallup, Jordan Addison, Quentin Johnston, Alan Lazard. Mine: Keenan Allen, Traylon Burks, Romeo Doubs, Alec Pierce, Marvin Mims. And then Sean's overvalued guys: Elijah Moore, Rashad Bateman, Jameson Williams. Mine: Debo, Odell Beckham, Adam Thielen, Zay Jones, and Tim Patrick. If you haven't checked out our running back episode or our quarterback tight end episode, those are out now. So be sure to check those out right here on this channel. You can find Sean on Twitter at @the_oddsmaker. You can find me at Chris Raybon. You can find us at those same handles on the free award-winning Action Network app. Until next time, let's get this money.